Good morning. I'm very sorry to say that I'm here to talk to you about one of the most perhaps boring subjects, which is standards, data requirements, things that often are perceived as unnecessary or extra to our work. Hopefully, I will be able to illustrate why such standards are very valuable and important to you in your daily work. Just quickly to introduce myself, so my name is Marek Suchocki. I'm based in the United Kingdom, and my role in Autodesk is to work with people such as yourself, so our users, but also your customers, the owners who invest in projects, and understanding how those projects are progressing and challenges they may be facing. And I'm there to share good practice. And I'm able to share good practice, obviously, because I work for Autodesk and we have fantastic technologies and methods of working, but also because I work with UK and international standards committees to understand what industry needs to do and how best to implement processes for effective and efficient project delivery. I'm going to start with a couple of definitions. So a mandate or a requirement is an order or commission to do something. You must do this. A standard is a level of quality or attainment. The how. How should you do this? So I need you to do this. In our case in the UK, I want you to do BIM by 2016. How is where the standards come in. So we've developed standards to tell people how to do good BIM. I'd like to ask you all 3 simple questions. Please stand up if you have never had a project go over time. Nobody? Okay. So please stand up if you've never had a project go over budget. Okay. Still nobody. And finally, please stand up if you've never had a project with a contractual dispute. Okay, all right. So we all have projects that are over time, over budget, and where the collaborative relationships fail. And we've known about this for many years. So here are a couple of reports from the UK. 1964, Banwell, inflexible contractual and professional conventions stop us progressing, being modern. 1998, the Egan report. I was actually involved in some of the work behind this. Project teams should collaborate using modeling, standardized components, and pre-assembly. So 20 years ago, we were talking about the same things we're talking about today. The United States, in 2004, nearly $16 billion of inefficiency due to poor information sharing and interoperability, of which 2/3 is borne by the owner. So your customers are taking the cost for us being inefficient. And there is another example from Germany, the Black Book of Projects. They identified inefficiencies from poor processes. Just some more words here. 30 to 35% inefficiency in our industry. 3 out of 5 projects are completed late. Clients simply accept the cheapest price, and tenderers submit low bids. Poor productivity, that was from 2014. By the way, these words were from a report in 1944. So 75 years ago, we were talking about how inefficient our industry was. Why haven't we changed? Potentially, the reason we haven't changed is because we have done nothing differently. We carry on executing projects in the same way. So BIM gives us all an opportunity to do things differently. And I'm pleased to say that in the United Kingdom, we identified this over 10 years ago, and we ran a lot of trials during the late 90s and in the noughties. Heathrow Terminal 5 is a good example where we learned how to do modeling and how to share information correctly. And we then developed a first standard called BS 1192/2007 on collaborative working. And we also realized that by using this modeling process and doing it correctly, we could actually provide project benefits. Benefits to the participants in the project, benefits to the customer, and actually benefits to the users of the things we delivered. So in March 2011, we produced a report. The Government Construction Client Group, myself and a few other people from Autodesk were involved in this. And we said that government as a client can derive significant improvement in costs, carbon, and value performance through the use of open shareable asset information. What do we mean by open shareable asset information? Well, BIM. Good interoperable BIM data. And based on that report, we had a task group, and we mandated what we called BIM Level 2 on all central government projects from April 2016. Please raise your hand if you have seen this diagram. Okay, so we've got maybe 20% of the room has seen this. So we call this the BIM wedge, and our idea was to talk about a maturity going from what we called level 0, which is unmanaged information where you just share files, through to level 1 of managed information in a traditional CAD process, to level 2, which is managing information in a BIM process. And our goal was to achieve this red line by 2016 for central government projects. But to do that, we had to write some contracts and standards. How can you tell someone, I want you to deliver BIM, if you don't tell them how? So if you remember my first slide about the mandate and the standard, so we needed the standards in order to enforce this mandate. And so, because we're British, we wrote a lot of standards. And they can be quite boring to read because there's a lot of information there, but we wanted to have the standards in place so that government could put contracts in place to procure BIM projects. And we wanted to make sure those contracts worked across the levels. So BIM level 1, where you can work in a CAD way, and moving on to BIM level 2, which is where we use BIM technologies, such as Autodesk Revit, Civil 3D, and so forth, the tools that you hopefully are beginning to use. And also we identified things that would be optional, so giving extra information. So this was the UK framework for delivering good quality BIM and stuff that we could put in government contracts so that the government would be satisfied that whoever tendered or bid on the work would deliver it consistently. I'm pleased to say that we were very successful. In our first trial projects, we delivered 20% savings in outturn costs and forecast whole life costs. I'm also very pleased to say that Autodesk technology was used in the vast majority of the first pilot projects, and we've engaged a number of government departments, so the Department of Education, our prison service, our large infrastructure departments, Department of Transport, Network Rail, and some of these customers, this is an example from High Speed 2, have gone on to leverage the techniques and methods in their projects to now aggregate data and have new ways of accessing the information. This is an illustration from High Speed 2's federated data store where they're aggregating geospatial data, model data from different systems, and because they followed the processes, they can bring that data together. And now here we're looking at a Forge viewer that's being used on this solution, but they just can search from a geospatial layer, or they can search by typing in, tell me the information at this perhaps train station or at this location. So by bringing the power of good standards and processes, you can now start looking at our project information in completely different ways. And this is a fantastic example by High Speed 2, how they're beginning to leverage the benefit of the processes. Now, the UK lessons were then taken forward, and we approached the European Union and said, we think these BIM ideas are good for you too. And so we helped establish the European Union BIM Task Group. And from about 2014, there was a procurement recommendation that all European Union member states should introduce BIM into contracts to gain benefit to the public. So we as taxpayers, if our governments introduce BIM, can derive significant benefits in cost, time, and carbon performance. I'm even more pleased to say that this gentleman here is actually an Autodesk person, Adam Matthews, and he was the first chair of the EU BIM task group. But that chairmanship is now rotated, not least of which because, as you may well know, in the United Kingdom, we are considering leaving the European Union in the next 20 years, perhaps, because it's taken us this long so far. And one of the outputs from the EU BIM task group has been a handbook for good BIM adoption. So if any of you in this room today work for a owner-operator or a governmental body, a local authority, please do download this document. It's available in many languages, and it will give you some methods and techniques to how to introduce BIM into a national program. And it's not just about buying software. So whilst we as Autodesk would love you to just say, let's go and buy some Autodesk software and everybody's happy, no, you need to do more. You need to grow capacity in the industry. You need to build a common collaborative framework. How can we all work together? You need public leadership. You need people to advocate and mandate this. And also we need communication. You need to tell people how to do things. One of the great things of the EU BIM task group is a shared vision. They want to deliver greater value for public money. So we as taxpayers, if we adopt these principles, can get better value. Have open and fair competition. By standardizing, everybody can play, but everybody has to learn and upskill to the new frameworks. We want to stimulate innovation and growth. I started by saying that our industry has spent 75 years repeating its mistakes. We have not been innovative. But by adopting BIM principles, we can actually innovate. And obviously, we want to grow our digital construction market. It was very satisfying to see that Turkish companies were celebrated at the AEC Excellence Awards, as you saw at the beginning of today. And that's a digital construction market that is developing here in Turkey. So, you should congratulate yourselves of already being on the journey. So let's just talk about some other national BIM initiatives, because I've talked about the UK. So, firstly, BIM seems to be happening everywhere. Everywhere around the globe, we have got countries who are learning, listening, practicing about good BIM. It's not just Europe. It's not America alone. It's not Australia. It's not Japan. It's everywhere. In fact, we've got countries, particularly in South America, like Chile, who are looking at the United Kingdom lessons and are implementing our processes in delivering their BIM approach. Vietnam, often considered a poorer nation, fantastic investment in BIM. They see it as a way to increase revenue for their internal economy and also their export economy, exporting talent and skills. But they're following the same processes and principles that have been adopted by, firstly, the UK, but now internationally. And I'll come back to that in a second. Let's look at Germany. So Germany has a mandate from next year to invest in BIM. I often like to joke about the fact that Germany is proud of the fact that it's a very efficient and successful nation in pretty much everything. But some of you may be aware of Berlin Airport. Now, yesterday I landed here in Istanbul Grand Airport. Fantastic airport, unbelievable project, and also pleased to say delivered using very many of the Autodesk technologies. Berlin Airport was meant to open 10 years ago. It's still not open. It's cost billions of pounds. I think they spend 37 million euro every month to maintain an airport that isn't open. So for Germany, this is a tragedy. This is an embarrassment, a national disaster. And why? Because they followed those traditional processes and methods that led to waste, inefficiency, poor collaboration. So Germany has said, no more. We're going to invest in BIM because we see BIM as a mechanism to stop poor practice. And hence they have this digital roadmap. Autodesk is very much involved. We're actually working with, obviously, German companies. We're working here with the Technical University of Munich, who are using our Forge platform. Because, again, Germany is really interested in very technical ways of working. And one of the things they want to look at is the component-based decomposition of assets. So here is a trial of a bridge where they've now broken it down into its elemental pieces, because we can classify and identify every element by following good processes. So again, using our technology, but also introducing those good BIM processes, Germany is adopting a BIM philosophy. If I go to the Nordics and the Netherlands, so Finland was actually the first country in the world to have BIM standards written. They've also introduced from 2014 infrastructure recommendation called InfraBIM. Norway similarly has got standards. Denmark, Sweden, they have a BIM alliance. So all of the Nordic countries have been heavily invested in BIM for many years now, very much writing the standards. So they don't have a BIM mandate, but they have the way. So they've kind of perhaps done one before the other. The UK, we did the mandate first, and then we wrote the standards. And then also in the Netherlands, BIM standards for buildings, and also for their infrastructure department, the Rijkswaterstaat, they have their data specification. So it's called COINS, and this is model data plus data, all contained in effectively a zip file, but that's what they transfer. So you have to deliver information back to the customer so they can populate their asset records using these methods. And they've also been involved, so Sweden and Norway have done research around model data for road highway maintenance, and many other projects are going on at the moment, as well as many of these nations being heavily involved in building smart that you may have heard of. Here's just a quick video of a project done by Norconsult, and I've included this purely because it's an illustration of the fact that BIM is not purely for new projects. This is the Vama Dam, very old dam, nearly 100 years old, and they needed to renovate it to introduce new pumping systems. So they've adopted using a BIM philosophy and a BIM process for data capture, so scanning, and then bringing the model data. So once you've scanned, you can build your models up to then sequence the project and execute it on site. A really excellent example of BIM, not just for new, but BIM for legacy renovation. We talked about the 2050 growth. Naji talked about it earlier today. In 2050, over 75% of the buildings and infrastructure that will exist then exist today. We're going to have to maintain and upgrade it. So adopting the same methods that Norconsult did to renovate and build a refurbished hydroelectric dam is a great example of why BIM is good for legacy as well as new. Russia. Russia also has a BIM requirement because Russia has a massive investment in infrastructure going on at the moment. In fact, in 2014, this is an extract from Order 926 from the Ministry of Construction, an instruction to adopt BIM in our projects. And President Putin, 2 years later, gave a construction sector instruction to develop an action plan for BIM for the end of that year. So in Russia, there is a BIM focus, just as there has been in the UK, as in Germany, and as in the Scandinavian countries. Again, I'm very pleased to say that Autodesk has been highly participative in this, and we've helped write guides on BIM for buildings and BIM for infrastructure over a number of years, and we constantly maintain them. This year, the Rosavtodor, the National Roads Authority, issued their own BIM mandate, so they want their roads to be developed and designed using BIM methods. Here we have a simple example of some work done by the Design Institute of Transport and Infrastructure based in the Ukraine, but they are providing services obviously within the Ukraine, but extensively now across Russia, and adopting and implementing BIM methods. So BIM methods are things that are right at the heart of how Russian infrastructure is now going to be developed, because there's so much work that they cannot deliver it using traditional processes and approaches. Middle East, lots of BIM requirements. Dubai Municipality has had a BIM mandate for buildings over 20 stories since, I believe, 2013. And many of their departments and projects are also requiring and specifying BIM. And earlier, Naji gave a fantastic example about the Museum of the Future. This project would not have been realized without a BIM methodology. There is no way that the architectural concept could have been executed without following BIM technologies, and BIM processes. So BIM is critical and the only way that we can deliver these type of solutions. So my last section is about international BIM standards, because what can you do here in Turkey to improve and increase your BIM adoption? Well, the first thing you can do is start to look at ISO 19650. Please, can you raise your hand if you have heard of or are already using 19650? Okay, so there's maybe 10% of you, so fantastic. So this was published first late last year, and it was parts 1 and 2. So part 1 here is concepts and principles, and part 2 is delivery phase of assets, so BIM in projects. I'm pleased to say I was involved in the authoring of these guides, and I'm still involved in the development of the new standards, part 3, which is out hopefully end of this year or very early next year, which is BIM in operations and maintenance, and part 5 at the very end, which is security-minded approach to BIM. It's unfortunate we live in difficult times, but when we have all of this data available, we must be clear on what information can be prepared by whom, seen by whom, and shared with whom. We can't just share stuff on the internet. That's not right, particularly for critical infrastructure and public assets. And part 4, we've just started a project on developing this, which is BIM data standards, so very much the data as opposed to the geometry. How does this work? Well, firstly, I showed you the BIM wedge earlier, where we talked about level 0 to level 3 BIM. The language has changed in the ISO 19650 to stages, stage 1, 2, and 3. The concentration of ISO 19650 as part 2 is stage 2, which is federated information models. What do we mean by that? Well, bringing together different BIM models, federating them together. How do we, we can't construct and design our projects using single models. The fantastic examples we've seen today from the AEC Excellence Awards winners, they weren't single models. There were multiple federated data sets, and ISO 19650 gives you guidance on how to prepare the information to do good federated models. And so its focus is stage 2. I wouldn't worry too much about this, but just to understand the context. We're not talking about object-level data, which is stage 3 and beyond. This is stuff that is being researched. And again, very pleased to say that we in Autodesk are pioneering some of this work. Particularly our Forge technology is enabling us to do things differently, but don't worry about it, it will come in the future. One of the concepts at the heart of ISO 19650 and the old UK standards is the idea of a common data environment. What do we mean by this? Well, it's a process, it's not a technology. The process is that we have people doing work in progress. If you are designers, you will work in your office developing a model or a set of models, and at some point in time, your manager or a design lead will do a check, a review, and approve. They'll check that the data is correct, they'll review it in a group, and then somebody will approve it to share. So you might be sharing it with a different team in your office or a different company working on your project, so they can bring that into their models as a reference. And they will also then develop a model and check, review, and approve, and then share it back so you can use it as a reference. And this iterative sharing of information is work in progress to share. That's all that talks about, is let's collaboratively develop our project, but always ensuring that we've checked, reviewed, and approved that. And when we've got our models to a level of development that allows it to go out into a different group, we publish it. So we can publish it for tendering, so it can go to contractors. We can publish it for construction, and we can publish it for handover, always through an approval mechanism. We don't just publish stuff without checking it, without reviewing it, and without approving it. And the archive, well, that's a digital record to say we know who did what and when and for what purpose, so that if there is a contractual dispute, which inevitably will happen, we can go back and identify that. And also, it's there for the customer to have as a record so they can use it in operation and maintenance. But the common data environment really is a process that can be enabled through technologies. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what ISO 19650 is all about. So we have some new language called appointing party and appointed party. So historically, we might have talked about the client or the employer or the owner. Because this was a collaboratively developed standard through an international user group, we've ended up with this language, appointing party, the person who's making the contract. And the appointed party is the person who receives the contract, so the supplier, the supply chain. And the first thing that has to happen is that the appointing party, the client, has to develop an exchange information requirement. This is the information I need from you to do my project correctly. Because if I do not give you my specification, my information requirement, how will I know that I am happy that I've got the information I need at the end? Because if I don't tell you what I want you to deliver, you have to make it up. So it's very important that we introduce this new concept of I give you my information needs. Because if I don't give them to you, you give me whatever you want. So once I've prepared my exchange information requirement, the suppliers, the appointed parties, can tender on it by developing a BIM execution plan. And this BIM execution plan is not so much about how to model, it's about how I will give you your information. You've asked for some information, I have a plan for giving you back that information. So the tenderers submit their pre-contract BIM execution plans. The customer, the appointing party, does a capability assessment. Who looks like they've given me the best BIM execution plan? Which company has the most experience and skills in delivering BIM projects? When I've decided, I then appoint one of the companies and write a contract. So we now have an agreement. And after that agreement, we then develop the BIM execution plan into a master information delivery plan. Is anyone in this room an architect? Please raise your hand if you're an architect. Okay, I'm sorry I'm picking on you, but for many architects, this is a pain. Why is it a pain? Because we've done plan, no design. But once we've gone our plan and our agreed plan, we can then go off and do some modeling, prepare some data, hand it back, and we check, is this what we asked for at that stage? Yes, proceed. And so we go through all of the phases of our project, constantly checking that we're giving the right information back, until at the very end, we hand back data to the customer, and that is BIM according to ISO 19650. Have a requirement, say how you're going to do it, go ahead and do it, and check that you're doing what you said you were going to do. Autodesk has some technologies for this. BIM 360 Docs, for example, has functionality to support that common data environment workflow, that check, review, and approve process that we talked about earlier. So if you don't currently use a technology for information sharing, clearly I'm going to encourage you to look at Autodesk BIM 360 Docs as a solution to do this, because we can support the ISO 19650 processes. And I'm extremely pleased to say that 2 weeks ago at Autodesk University in Las Vegas, we've made a formal commitment to ensure that we do as much as we can to be fully supportive of ISO 19650. So we are going to do some more development. So if you keep coming back and checking over the next year or two, hopefully you'll see a lot more information about how Autodesk is supporting these international data standards using particularly BIM 360 Docs, but also within our modeling platforms as well. And so in this case, we've had a check, review, approve, and the file will be moving forward in the process. So it's just showing you a procedure that you can automate in the software. So I'm just going to finish by giving you a call to action. What should you do now? So I'd say embrace ISO 19650, because the standards define international BIM good practice. So please go ahead and review the standards and guidance. Seek assistance from experts. So if you're not sure on what to do, please do go out and talk to experts. Autodesk is clearly a resource, as are many of our partners who are getting themselves up to speed and understanding how ISO 19650 works. Please implement a common data environment. If you're not doing this, of all the things you need to do, this is the most basic way to ensure good information management. So please implement a technology such as BIM 360 Docs. Pilot the workflows. You need to practice. So practice the idea of getting your customer to write an information requirement and you writing a plan on how you're going to deliver that. because it will really change your mindset. Refine your process. You're not going to get it right first time, but do kind of refine and keep going. And then finally, deploy this across your organizations. Get everybody to follow the same procedures, so share information efficiently, reduce errors, because that's the one thing that keeps happening when we do poor processes. And hopefully, if you do this, you're all going to win more work. And finally, there are some resources available there. Most of this information, if not all of it, is freely available. I'm afraid the ISO standards are paid for, but please do click on these links and you'll get a lot more information. And on that, I'm pleased to say I will finish. Thank you.